Welcome, my friends. Welcome to the Esteban Hour. I am your host, Esteban, and thank you for joining us today. Today, on the Esteban Hour, we have a very, very special guest, contributor from the Midas Touch Network. If you're familiar with the Midas Touch Network, they have over 1 million followers for them, and they are a source of news that brings out the truth on mainstream media. Okay, and today we will be sitting down with, or I should say, speaking with good old country brother Tennessee Brando. Before we bring him in, we have a country song, a very, very nice country song, I may say so myself, that we'd like to show you so you can see the talent and artistry in this gentleman. Take a look.
Told me that if I didn't write a song about the whole Alabama boat brawl, that I should have my songwriter's card revoked. So I wrote this one for you, and here it goes. They went down to Montgomery, tried to park the boat, got told they had to move, and it fragiled their egos. They were itching for the chance to live out Aldine's battle cry. Well, they floated around and they found out when they jumped on the wrong guy. A whole lot of good people were just fed up with the hate. That shit may have flew way back in 68. So if you're feeling froggy and decide to run that mouth, remember when you do, you'll float around and find out. The little alphas watched in horror all around the internets, cringing at the chair shot up beside that bitch's head. Their small town wet dream had died there on the docks when some old boy got hit so hard he fell plumb out of his crocs. A whole lot of good people are just fed up with the hate. That shit may have flew way back in 68. So if you're feeling froggy and decide to run that mouth, remember when you do, you'll float around and find out. Remember when you do, you'll float around and find out.
All righty. So I'm backstage back here, and I'm bouncing my head back and forth, and catchy tune. I love it, love it, love it, love it. Welcome everyone to the show, Mr. Tennessee Brando.
Hey, good to be here.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So first, let's start with that great song that we just played for everyone. How did you come up with it? What was your inspiration?
Well, it was the whole Alabama boat brawl down in Montgomery. A friend of mine sent me the story. I hadn't been online in a couple of days and wasn't familiar with it. And I've been writing a lot of social commentary, political satire type tunes. And a friend of mine sent me that. It was like, man, if you don't write about this one, you've missed the mark. You got to write about this one. And so I started, watching the clips and I've learned one thing about these type of songs when, these type of events happen so fast. I mean, the news is constantly changing so quick, and one story will be big today, and then the next day a new story takes over. And so you just got to be fast and on top of it. And so I just grabbed my guitar and wrote it as fast as I could and threw it up there. That's probably what you see in that video might have been my second time ever playing the song. I just wrote it and just sang it. That's it.
Well, it was in my opinion, it was well put together. Your words and your lyrics, your lyrics and your music, well put together. And I just like the tune, the beat to it. So even if you didn't care what the words said, you're still jiving.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Now, do are there other like-minded, individuals that would also find the appreciation in a song like this or in what you do?
Yeah, I think definitely so. I've developed a pretty good following doing it, and a lot of people seems to like it. And then I've went out and played these songs live in front of crowds, and it's went over pretty good in certain places.
Nice.
And so I think it's it's like I said, I just write them as they happen. So I put out an album about a month or so ago. It's called Shots of Truth Volume One because I've already got Volume Two written, and
All
Volume
right.
One was just whatever was happening at that particular moment. You know, it was just songs about the news story of the day, and so. They may over time, they may become a little bit outdated once news stories takes over, but I think they'll be a good reflection. Years from
Yes.
now, when people looks back
Yes.
at it, there was a snapshot of this place and time that we were this crazy place and time that we're in.
Yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter if the situation that you're singing about passes. First of all, I don't really think any situation really passes.
True.
They just might be a reincarnated situation, if you will, and then
I
we can
agree.
play the same song.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say, as you post your songs, we will definitely play them.
I appreciate that.
All right, all right, okay. So let's go back a little bit for our audience. One of the reasons why I like doing these kind of interviews with young brothers as yourself is, there are a lot of dudes out there that can use some motivation, some inspiration,
Yeah.
especially in today's generation, Gen Zs, right? 20
Mhm.
and 30-year-olds. They're not as industrious as my generation, as your generation. Some of them, sometimes don't feel the need to exist or go on because they feel that everything is too hard. They're perhaps not in the best economic point of view. But I like to have these type of interviews to where my audience can see a reflection of something positive or
Yeah.
someone positive who can inspire other young men to say, hey, you can do this too, you
Yeah.
can be at this position too. So if I may, can we start back? If you can tell us a little bit of how your childhood was, your teenagehood, and how things were for you in school.
Okay. Yeah. I grew up in. See, I'm right on the border of Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia, so
Oh,
I can be in all three states in like 10 minutes.
okay.
I'm over in Tennessee at the moment, but I grew up over in Kentucky, and I was raised an only child. At the time, looking back at it now, we were poor, but at that particular time, I didn't really know it because there was kids that had it better than me at school, and there was kids that had it worse. So I always went through life thinking I was kind of in the middle until I got a little bit older and realized how things really were. But my dad was a truck driver. The coal and logging industry is big in this part of the world, and so my dad drove a log truck most of his life, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I was an only child. So I was kind of the quiet kid back in school, which is kind of hard to believe these days, considering all the talking I do online. But back in school, I was just kind of the quiet kid that kept to myself. But I guess I was listening to everybody anyway.
So that would be my next question. What was your schooling like? Would you consider yourself a popular kid, a bully, or a nerd, or none of
I
the
was
above?
I definitely lean more on the nerd angle. I'll be honest with you. I'll own it. I was
Ah,
I was more the quiet nerd, like the one that just kept himself. I had friends. I had my little circle of friends, but I wasn't a jock. I wasn't popular. I didn't bully anybody. I got bullied some here and there. Back when I was younger, you can't tell it now, but back when I was younger, I had red hair and freckles, and so I got picked on a whole lot for the red hair by the older kids when I was little and things like that. But then luckily, as I grew up, I got taller and kind of broader, and people started leaving me alone just because I was taller
mhm.
than they were. So that kind of helped.
I hear
But
that.
yeah, I was more the quiet kid that the reason I throw nerd in there is because, and I'm not saying that people that reads are nerds, but I'm just saying like
Mhm.
I was the kid that on lunch break and breaks, if I had extra time, I'd go in the library and sit and read a book. I had a history teacher named Mr. Baker. I love that dude. He would always tell me other books to read that would cover the subject outside of what the history book taught us. Like, hey, if you want to learn more about this, go get this book.
Right.
And so I was the kid that would be in the library on lunch break, sitting there reading the book, and the other kids would come like, "Hey, what you reading for?" And I'd be like, "Well, I just."
Yeah,
So
I
that's
was
kind
going
of
to
me.
say, who does that today, right?
Yeah,
Do they even know what a library is?
true. Yeah.
All right, all right. Okay, so as you progressed into your 20s and your 30s, what told you that you wanted to, sort of be an activist, or what you are, a contributor for the Midas
Yeah.
Touch Network? What made you want to be part of the, so to speak, political realm?
Well, you know what's funny? I'm glad you asked that because I really always wanted to be, but I became a musician back when I was a teenager, and I was very inspired by a lot of the folk singers. You know, the Bob Dylan and Buffalo Springfield, Neil Young.
All right.
I love that kind of music, and I was big into reading like Hunter S. Thompson books back when I was in high school. I really got off on reading those, and so, I always wanted to be in politics in some way or speak about it. But when you play music and you're out in the world, and you're especially when you're playing in dive bars in East Tennessee, Southeast Kentucky, you tend to play songs that people wants to hear. And so I spent the last 25 years of my life as a musician, just traveling around playing songs that I wrote, and cover songs too. Before when I was writing the songs, I would write them more kind of. I would leave the listener a little room for the imagination. They wouldn't be as directly political, satirical as the song you heard at the start of the show.
Right.
And so I don't know. As I went along, man, doing it, I just felt more and more like there's more issues that I want to be talking about, and I'm kind of limited to do that in the bar room where you're expected to be a live jukebox. It's like you gotta. There was just issues that I thought were way more important, and I wanted to talk about those, and those became more important than people putting tips in my tip jar to sing them a cover song. And so I just sat down with the TikTok app. Really, is where I first started doing it.
Okay.
I saw a friend of mine do kind of like a social commentary style video, and I liked the way she went about it. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I never thought about talking into my phone. And so I sat down and made a video, and made a couple of them. And then, I really wasn't hooked on the TikTok app yet. I really didn't understand even how to use it. And then one day I logged back on it, and I've got like 10,000 followers or something. It just starts growing. I'm like, what? I was like, what the hell happened? And so then I just ran with it, and I just started talking more and getting more into it. And it just took off. And then there was a whole new audience of people that never realized I played music. So that's when I began writing the satirical songs, because it was like, okay, I'm talking politics and I'm talking about current events. And so it took me a little while to figure out how to marry the music with it, if that makes any sense, how to bring those two together. But then once I
Absolutely.
started writing the songs, it all came together.
What a great idea. What a great idea, especially a great opportunity to bring in more interested folks. So
Yeah.
without the music, perhaps they didn't want to just hear you talk.
Yeah.
Some people will go, oh yeah, 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 yeah. But now you bring into the music, and it gets their ear. So
Yeah.
now they're like, okay, I like those tunes. What is he
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was something, just kind of took off. And then I just kind of, just started embracing it across all the platforms. Once TikTok took
Mhm.
off, I was like, okay, let me just try this act on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I just kind of took it across to all social media, and just ran with it. And it's turned out pretty good. I've and
Did you
I've and it's
find it?
it's actually really liberating for me, honestly, because like I said, it's what I was wanting to do all my life. I just couldn't find a vehicle to do it with, if that makes any
Right,
sense.
right, right, right. Well, it's funny you use that word liberating, because I would think those who are listening to it on the other side, it could be liberating for them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, so if you were no, not if, but what would you tell your 16-year-old self today, if you were able to go back, and you're looking at your 16-year-old self in your old bedroom,
Yeah.
laying on your bed? What would you tell him at this point, speaking from the future?
That is a great question, man, and that's one I think about all the time. And really, what I would tell him more than anything is just be patient. That things are going to happen. I think I spent way too much time worrying about things, and trying to force things to happen.
Right.
And I think I would tell him, hey, just let things happen as they want to. Just sit back and enjoy the ride. Because if you try to any time in my life that I ever tried to plan something or force something to happen, it never worked. But if I just sort of went about it, it just off the seat of my pants a lot of times, just kind of winging it, I made it. And I think I would say to him, be patient. Everything's going to be okay. It's not going to. I think I sat and worried about a lot of things that really was out of my control. And I realized as time went on, hey, I was spending a lot of time worrying about stuff that was never going to happen and worrying about stuff that was beyond my control. And so I think I would say to him, just be patient. Everything's going to be okay.
Do you consider yourself a good kid? You were a good kid?
I think so. I never picked on anyone. I never bullied anybody. And like I said, I was quiet and I listened to a lot of people. I was the kid that, a lot of people come to talk to and just, a lot of my family would be like, they always wanted to talk to me for some reason. They'd be like, I want to talk to you. And I don't know. I've just always been a good listener. And so, I never, like I said, I knew how it felt to be bullied some, and I never did it to anyone else. So overall, I think I was all right.
Well, I mean, if you talk the way that you talk on your videos, then we can all understand, because you seem to be very fair-minded and down to earth to where you might have an opinion or agree on one side, but you're open to
Mhm.
to hear other possibilities and
Yeah.
other folks' opinion, regardless on which side of the aisle they're on.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of times when you're making content on social media, you're trying to get your point across, and it can come, you are giving your side of the story. And so a lot of times people take that and think that you're being one sided, but
Right.
really it's not. You're voicing your opinion. And there's times, that I get comments in the comment section, or someone will reach out to me with a message and really make me think about it. There's times that I've said, well, wait, I didn't think about it that way before. And
Right.
so, I'm always open to discussion, as long as people's being fair and respectful.
Right.
It's always, and I think that's something too for me. All the years I spent as a musician out here playing, I would sit and talk with people and hear their stories, and I was just always listening to their side. And I think a lot of times I'm just trying to offer a different perspective, especially here in the South. Here in Tennessee, um, I'm a blue dot in a red sea. And so it's kind of like saying to them, hey, there's another way of thinking about things. So I think that's a lot of it for me.
So, piggybacking off of what you just said, being a blue dot in a red sea, um, in the great state of Tennessee, it's predominantly Republican, right?
Yeah.
Many of my colleagues and friends, they fringe upon the fact that um, I have Republican friends.
Hmm.
I talk to Republicans, and I will continue to. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what my stance is, what my party affiliation is, what my opinion is. If those are my friends, those are my friends. If they're willing to, they may not agree with my political stature, but they may be willing to take a bullet for me.
Yeah.
Okay, we sit at each other's tables with our families, and we do things for one another. So my question is, do you find that that scenario or that circumstance as well, being a blue dot in a red sea? Do you find yourself having Republican friends that
Yeah.
may be on the opposite side of the aisle, but they're still your friends?
Yeah, they are. I've got a lot of friends and a lot of people have stood by me. Like when I definitely started speaking out more and doing what I'm doing now. I have Republican friends and that still stick by me and support me. And I don't believe in losing friendships over that. The only time that that I'm going to lose a friendship is if it's how they treat other people.
That's
And
right.
I'm not going to be friends with someone who's racist or someone who's homophobic or
Right.
someone who that's what would end a friendship, but not necessarily political views. I have some really good friends that still on the opposite side of the aisle, and sometimes with some of those friends, we'll have some really good debates or sometimes some heated debates a little bit, and then I have other friends who we just never talk about it because we know we don't agree, and so we just sort
Right.
of we talk about boxing or we talk about whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's I think it's important to keep the friendships and be open minded, and because there's always another way of thinking, always another way of looking at things.
I'm very happy to hear you say that. You are one of the most recent folks that I've been able to ask that question to, because I don't want to say a lot, but there are some Democrats that get very angry when
Mm-hmm.
they hear you say, "Oh, my Republican friend."
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like don't understand that. And I'm like, am I supposed to hate everybody that doesn't like or appreciate what I like? and
Yeah.
appreciate. And I don't think that's right. And I also feel how are you supposed to get them to understand your way of thinking if you're ready to write them off to hell from the very
Yeah.
beginning, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of, I have had a few people on that side of the fence that's kind of wrote me off, and I know how that feels. I know how it feels to be written off because of your beliefs. And so, I try to keep that door open. And like I said, there's moments where I draw the line and say, okay, after that we can't be friends, but for the most part we still can be.
Right, right. In fact, my Republican friends, they're able to say, I hate your president. I don't like anything that he's doing. I hope he gets booted out of office. But what time are you coming over for dinner?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll reply, screw you. I don't like your president either. I'm glad he lost. I'll be
Yeah.
there at 7.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So um moving on towards if you were in a in front of a group full of young men, 20s and
Mhm.
30s, what advice, guidance, or encouragement would you give them? And this is especially important with me asking you this from the great state of Tennessee. What advice would you give both Caucasian young men and Black young men?
That's a really good question. To the Caucasian young men, I would say, to both, I would say this. To both, I would say, be true to yourself. Be who you are. Don't be afraid to speak out and say things. I think people get too caught up in the whole idea that if they speak, they're going to be canceled.
Right.
For everybody that disagrees with you, you're going to have somebody else that agrees. And so I just believe you just got to put yourself out there. Yeah, you may face consequences for some things you say, but you can't let those consequences stop you from standing up for what you believe in. To the Caucasian young men, I would say, listen and hear the other side and hear what's going on, because we don't know what it's like to be in that world. I'm a white guy from East Tennessee. I don't understand. What I would say to the Black young men is, I'm listening to you. I don't know what it's like to be you, but I'm listening, and I want to hear what you're going through. So I would really just say to both sides, listen to one another, hear each other out, and don't be so knee jerk about it, and try to pit yourselves against one another. I think if we would realize, okay, we've got our struggles, and it's, I mean, I hear a lot of people that look like me will say, the minute you bring across a problem that Black people are having, they immediately want to kind of get knee jerk about it and go, well, what about my problems? And I'm like, I realize we all have problems too, but can we listen here and work together? So I think I would say to both sides to hear the other side out, and listen, and to the Black community, I would say, I'm listening to you and learning. There's a whole lot of things in my life that I've had to learn over the years, and I want to continue to do better.
Great response. Absolutely great response. We do need a lot more of that, of listening to each other.
Yeah.
Not just talking, but listening to each other. And for my audience listeners right now, I want you to take his words into perspective and to see that not all Southerners believe one specific thing or in one direction.
Yeah.
There are many good and great people from the South, and this is one of them.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So do you do you have a family? Do you have children?
Yeah. Yeah. I have 5 children. I have four boys and a girl, and then I have a grandson, and I'm 43. So I, I
Wow.
was raising an only child, but I got a pretty big family now.
Wow, nice, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
You've got one girl. That must be your baby.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right, all right. I have two girls,
Awesome.
21 and 16.
That's
And they're
awesome.
both like 10 years old to me.
Yeah. They
These
all
little
are.
girls.
Yeah. I call it, my oldest son was funny. My oldest son's 22. My daughter's 20. Then I have a 16-year-old son, an 11-year-old son, and a 4-year-old son, 5-year-old. He just turned 5. So I still got a. I was figuring it up the other day. I think I'll be like 56 when my youngest son graduates. So I'm gonna be dealing. Yeah, I'll have plenty of stuff to deal with.
You're
But
not going to be the only one.
babies at the end of the day. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so as a father and as a grandfather, um,
Yeah.
um, if you had your family in front of you, which I'm sure you do often, but now in public, what type of advice do you give your sons when they go out in the street, and your daughter?
I'm always, my grandmother on my mother's side was this way with me, and I just kind of picked up her tactics. She was always just really blunt with me, very truthful, and always taught me to be very blunt and truthful. And I just tell them to treat people with respect, and be good to people, and not take things so seriously. We laugh and cut up a whole lot around my house. I'm always joking with the kids, and I just talk with them like I would my friends. I don't really. I never have been the type of dad that like came down hard on them, like, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. I'm more like, so if, in other words, if one does something they shouldn't have done or gets in trouble or whatever, I'm not the parent that comes down real hardcore on them. I'm more of the nature to be like, so what was going through your head when you decided to do that? Why did you want to do that? Tell me about what made you want to do that. And then I go back, and a lot of times they're telling me stuff I did when I was a kid. And instead of coming down on them, I'm like, well, I'm not going to be a hypocrite about it. I tried that once too, and
Right.
this is what happened. And I just try to, I don't know, like I go back to my childhood, and like I said, my grandmother on my mother's side, we called her Nana. She was the one I could go to with no judgment. I knew she was never going to judge me. I could be open and honest with her, and she wasn't going to come down hard on me. She was going to listen to me and hear me out. And that's something I've tried to pass on to my kids. It's just, if I had my 16-year-old, he had a little spell here recently where he was getting in trouble at school and kept acting out, and some people was coming down pretty hard on him, and I was just going, so what made you do that? What got in your head and made you think that was okay to do that? And then once he started telling me, I was like, well, I had those same feelings as a young man too. I went through that phase. I know what you're talking about. I've been there before. So I just try to approach it more as a friendship thing, because with me and my own dad, once we became friends, we were good. It's like back when we was growing up and he was dad, that was kind of a little bit harder. But once I realized at the end of the day, he's just another guy, like all of us. It's like, hey, he's just a dude, that has the same emotions, goes through the same kind of things. I think for a long time, you'll hold your parents to this standard, like that's my dad, he should do this.
Right.
Then as you get older, you realize, well, hey, he's just another guy like me, and once we become friends, now he's like, my dad feels like an older brother, or but it's a great relationship because we're friends and we're just open and honest now. There's not really that dad ruling over the son. It's just like, it's just two guys talking now, and I just try to pass that on down to my kids and make it the same way.
All right, all right. Have you ever undergone any form of depression or anxiety?
Oh, absolutely, man. Back when I was younger, I've battled it my entire life, but back when I was younger, really went through it pretty rough. And then I was actually hospitalized when I was 32 for depression and alcohol abuse. And I've definitely been down quite a bit, but I've just always took them as learning experiences and figured a way to get back up from it.
That's right.
Being a musician, you hold a lot of, you're expressing yourself and you're getting your point of view out there, but you're also kind of, you're in front of people all the time. And if you have a bad day, I've said this before, there's been many a times I had a really bad day, and then I had to walk on stage somewhere and say, hey, y'all ready to have a good time tonight?
Right.
And that kind of, then when the show's over and you're coming down from it, that's when the depression can start kicking you, and so, but I've just sort of learned I've found ways to get back up from it and to deal with it and help to understand it, if that makes sense.
And if you can share briefly, what are some of those ways that you've learned to come around it, get through it, and also to avoid it again?
Yeah, well, I look back at some of the low points in my life, and I thought it couldn't get any worse. I thought it was going to be so bad that I would never be able to get up from it. Well, enough time passes, you look back on that moment, and you go, it was bad at the time, but really now it's not that bad compared to what I'm going through now. You know what I mean? So you're just always, I think a lot of people thinks that they're going to have this ta-da moment, like they're going to make it somewhere and they're going to be successful and everything's going to be answered. And I don't think that's life. I think every time we climb another mountain, we get to the top, there's another mountain to go up. There's more challenges to face. And so there's been some moments in my life that I really got down and depressed about. And then I look back at it and went, well, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have, A, B, and C wouldn't have happened. And I wouldn't have ended up over here. And so sometimes when you're in that dark moment, you just have to realize, hey, this is a dark time. I've always kind of compared it to like your favorite television series. If you're watching your favorite TV show and the character's going through some really rough times in season 3, then there's a good finale at the end of it, and then the next season something else happens and there's a new storyline going, and that's just kind of how I look at life. So when I get in those moments, I'm like, okay, I'm in the dark season right now. I'm hoping for a good finale, and we'll see where it goes next season.
That's right. That's right. So would you say that there is light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what you could be going through, experiencing, that there is light at the end of the tunnel?
I think there is, and I think also it's your perspective. One thing that I've learned is, sometimes it's our expectations that really gets us hurt, and it's our expectations that disappoints us.
That's
And
true.
so a lot of times, if you can learn how to change your perspective, going back to what I was talking about earlier with my dad and how that we're friends now, we went through a phase where we just really had a lot of hard times, and I had to change my perspective on things in order for that relationship to survive. I had to look at it differently. So there was a light at the end of the tunnel, but I had to turn that light on myself. I had to go toward that light quicker and make it make sense. I think a lot of times, you get in a situation and it's dark and depressing, but if you can change your perspective, and I had a good friend that helped me get through that, because I was going through that dark time, and my friend was like, "Hey, man, your dad's just another dude like you, and if you could realize that, you've done the things you're mad at him over are things you've done yourself." And I'm like, and it just started making sense to me, and I was like, okay, so I started changing my perspective, and now we have a great relationship and a great friendship. So I think changing your perspective will help you find that light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. Okay. Next. So as an adult, as a father, as a family man, do you find it hard to go through life's pressures, to try to keep everything together and on point and not forget one thing? Do you find it hard? And what do you do to get over your any anxieties or pressures that may fall before you?
Well, I had to learn to realize that, you really can't juggle everything at one time. You just kind of have to. A lot of times I'll say to my family when we're going through things, there'll be a whole lot of different things going on. And I'm like, I just got to deal with one thing at a time. Whatever's right in front of me at this moment, we got to deal with that, and then we'll work on the next one. And there's been times I've said to one of my kids, hey, I'm dealing with this right now, and as soon as we get this done, I'll get to you.
Right.
You kind of got to, because if you try to take on too much, I think that's what a lot of people thinks they can solve every problem at one time, and you can't. And you just have to realize that. You have to realize that, sometimes you have to realize when you can win, and you have to realize when you can't. You have to realize, I can't beat this. So we're just going to have to let it all crumble, and then we're going to have to pick up the pieces and go forward. There's been times it's kind of like a card game. You just kind of have to, you have to know when, okay, it's time for me to bow out on this one and wait for the next hand to come around. So I think it is hard to juggle it all. And there's a whole lot, and having children with this wide of an age gap, my oldest son being 22 and my youngest son being 5, I've got a son that's got 22-year-old problems, and I've got a 5-year-old that's got 5-year-old problems, and there's no way that I can necessarily, juggle all of it. I just have to take on one task at a time and say, okay, today we're going to work on this, and that's about the best way I can do it anyway.
Absolutely, and do your best not to overload yourself, right?
Yeah, and not to overthink it. To overload yourself, and if you start overloading yourself and overthinking it, you get too many irons in the fire, and then you look around and go, well, I forgot to do something.
Right.
So.
And isn't that a real man, a man that can say, yeah, I can do that, and then can also say, I'm sorry, I can't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. I think you have to be able to realize that. And I don't think there's no shame in that. I think a lot of times,
Right.
people fight battles that they really weren't supposed to, or that they were never meant to fight. That they'll take on something that I've seen people get so engrossed in something and so bent out of shape over something. I'm like, that really wasn't your fight to
Right.
fight.
They had no business getting involved in that. Yeah.
Yeah. You just have to learn when it is, learn when it is, and learn when it isn't. I had a talk with my son recently about something we were going through, and he was upset about it, and I was like, that's not your fight. And I went back and told him a story about mine. I was like, hey, I've been where you're at. I feel what you're feeling right now, and I realized one day that wasn't my argument to be having. So you just have to learn how to prioritize yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So next question. Which I'm sure I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you like your job? And if so, what do you like about it?
Well, I like meeting people, and I like just meeting people and hearing new ideas. And I've met so many people just since I started doing this, man. I've met so many people, like-minded people, and people with different views, different opinions, from all across the country. That's what's so crazy. It's like I never would have thought 20 years ago that I would be able to sit at my table or sit out in my yard and express my opinion into my phone, and then it would be seen by people in New York and overseas and everywhere else. And all of a sudden you got people, all over the country tagging you in videos and sharing stuff with you and calling you by your name. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's fun. And I've actually done podcasts with a couple of them like this, and met them and talked with them on the phone, and got to know them and stuff. And it's just really cool to think that you could sit here in sleepy little Cumberland Gap, Tennessee, and connect with someone in New York, and express ideas and exchange ideas. And so that's been a whole lot of fun for me.
All right, all right. I want to go back to a point you had mentioned in the very beginning. You had mentioned that you were raised poor.
Mhm.
Um, 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 Now, coming from the state of Tennessee, where there are a lot of there's a lot of poverty
Mhm.
there. I mean, there's a lot of poverty everywhere.
Yeah.
But could you share with us your feelings on how can I put this in a politically correct manner? Many of those that are undergoing a sense of poverty in Tennessee do not believe or agree, with democratic ways or elements.
Mhm.
Could you tell us why or why not?
That's something I talk about a lot and I think about a lot because I'm surrounded by it. And one thing that the Republican Party has been really good at, and I'll give them credit for this, they've been really good at creating this narrative that the Democrats and the liberals are these evil people coming for everything that we hold sacred here in the South. When you grow up in the South, you're brought up by people, and you're brought up. We hunt, we fish, we're in the woods all the time with our grandparents and our uncles, and we're taught to shoot guns at a young age. I remember being a little kid and my grandfather getting down on one knee behind me, embracing me so I could shoot his shotgun. And you're on the lake fishing and things, and you're took to church as a young kid, and you're taught to believe in God. And then the Republican Party came along and said, "Hey, these evil Democrats, they're coming to take your guns away from you. They're coming to take they're they're crapping on your religion. They just did a really good job of creating that narrative that the evil Democrats was out to get everybody down south. And there's this thing in the South too, that may be hard for people up north to understand, but we've always been raised to not trust anyone from outside this part of the world. There's still this massive distrust here. And the fact that I'm sitting here talking to a man in New York, there's people that would say, what was you doing talking to him for?
Right,
Because
right.
it's like, what's he coming down here wanting to talk to us for? There's that distrust there, and Republicans capitalized on that so well, by spreading a lot of fear tactics. As long as I can remember, and my family's always talked politics, even when I was a kid. And I just remember some of my earliest memories hearing, family members say, "Well, the Democrats are coming for our guns," and then, the Democrats believe in abortion, and the Democrats believe in this and that, and they just did a really good job of of turning everyone against it to where they wouldn't, to where a lot of times they ended up voting against their own interests, in my opinion. That's something I've tried to
Right.
point out a lot. It's like you know, we still have all the problems we had. I mean, you might be bent out of shape over the new Barbie movie, but what did that have to do with the
Right.
struggle you was facing? You know, like they
Right.
got you so distracted by this culture war and so caught up in this that you're worried about that, and you can't feed your family. You can't figure out how to pay your medical bills. There's all sorts of things, and then if you try to say, well, there's this Democrat that has an idea, he's got a program or he's got a policy, they don't trust it because they've been taught not to.
And let me tell you, it's really sad. It's really sad. From a city boy, on the outside looking in, and a lot of folks that feel the way that I do, we love the South. We love
Yeah,
the Southerners. There are a lot of people that still have some negative feelings and thoughts, but many of us really feel like there could be a connection
yeah,
between the East and the West, the North and the South.
yeah,
Um, but it's the Southern mentality that exists, that they don't want anything to do with us.
yeah,
And it's sad because we don't necessarily feel that way
yeah.
towards them.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's a lot of good people down here that I think I've said for years that for far too long the other side's had the microphone and they've been the loudest with the microphone. But down here in Tennessee, we have what became known as the Tennessee Three. They were the three lawmakers that were expelled earlier this year. We got Justin Jones, Justin Pearson, Gloria Johnson. They're speaking for people that have our viewpoints, and there's a whole lot of people down here that would love nothing more than to sit down and talk to people from all over the country and start chipping away at all those stereotypes that they put on Southern people. And that's one thing that really gets under my skin is when I see people exploiting the worst of us and the stereotype things that you see happening, and then you see Southerners going along with it, and I'm like, wait a minute, don't go along with this. This is just dragging us backwards. When I see someone like Kid Rock, who's from Detroit, Michigan, come down south and start waving a Confederate flag around, I'm like, hey, that's everything we've been trying to get away from.
right.
And now you're coming down here and you're capitalizing on that stereotype to try to push this agenda. And that's something that a lot of us have worked for years to get past and do better from. And so there's a whole lot of people here that I don't know if Tennessee will ever. I don't know if a blue state's possible. I didn't think it would be for Georgia though, and it worked. So,
Right.
who knows? Who knows what'll happen? But there is a lot of good people here, and I think the whole thing with the Tennessee Three that kind of gave me hope because everything kind of backfired there. I think they really thought they were just going to shut them up, and what they ended up doing was making stars out of them,
Right.
and just strengthening their platform. And that really, like that gave me a lot of hope considering what we're up against down here.
It gave a lot of us hope. I'm watching that from the outside because,
Yeah,
like you said, it made the situation worse off for them because we're
yeah,
past that point, right? It's been months since that happened,
yeah,
and all of us still know who those three individuals are.
yeah,
Whereas before that situation, nobody knew who any of them was.
yeah,
Uh, and maybe I can even say, arguably say, nobody even cared.
hmm,
But after the fact, with what we saw them go through and how they were
yeah,
treated, many of us very much so cares about those three today, and many
yeah,
others that are going through that, but just have not made it public.
yeah. And that's what I pointed out. There's one of my favorite bands, the Drive By Truckers. They have a song called "The Duality of the Southern Thing," and they talk about how that in the South you have all the negativity and all the stereotypes here, and then over here, I mean, you've got okay. In other words, what I'm trying to say, you've got Governor Bill Lee, who's probably one of the worst governors in the whole country, and then you have Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, and Gloria Johnson. You have that duality kind of battling with one another, and like I said, that side's always been louder, and that's why it's good to see people speaking up. There's a lot of, down here we have they're called the Well Read Comedy Tour. Trey Crowder and Corey Forster and Drew Morgan. They're a great comedy a trio that does liberal progressive style comedy and stuff like that. It's starting to make me realize, hey, there's more in that duality. There's more people than you would imagine that thinks like us. I know I've had a lot of people say to me that they've scrolled past my videos and not stopped on them because they see a guy in a bandana with tattoos and with a Southern accent, and they go, "Oh, I don't want to hear what he has to say," and then
There's
they'll
that
stop eventually.
stereotyping again.
Yeah, there you go. And so, yeah, I think that there's a whole lot more of us than people realize.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So before we get to, I want to get into a little bit of politics.
Okay.
But I want to roll one of your videos
Okay.
that has posted that has gotten actually over 1 million views on YouTube. Excuse me, 1.3 million views on YouTube and over 2 million views in total. So let's show this video right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I know this one's going to rub a whole lot of people the wrong way, but I really don't care. I'm going to say it anyway. Not electing Hillary Clinton in 2016 will go down as one of the biggest mistakes in our nation's history. I don't give a shit what you think of Hillary Clinton. I don't care if you love her or hate her. I don't care if you love the Democratic Party or you hate the Democratic Party. The Supreme Court justices that was nominated under Donald Trump would not have been nominated under Hillary Clinton. And the bullshit that we see coming out of the Supreme Court today would not be happening had she took office in 2016. I don't give a rat's ass about Donald Trump's policy. I don't give a rat's ass about his mean tweets. His presidency set us back 100 years. And there's a whole lot of people out there celebrating. Oh, look, we got it. We won something. You didn't win shit. All you did was trample on fellow Americans' rights, stuff that would have never affected you or bothered you in the least. That's why I call bullshit on this whole idea that you won't smile our government and don't tread on me. That's why I always call that bullshit flag out for the bullshit flag that it is.
On point. Excellent. My thoughts exactly. Preach, brother, preach.
I appreciate it. I hadn't saw that in a while. I don't really go back and watch my own videos, but I just remember being really frustrated that day when I sat down and just had to get that off my chest.
I feel you, and you got it off your chest very, very well, because there are millions of Americans that feel exactly that way.
Thank you.
Even now, with what we're going through with all of these indictments and stuff, every once in a while, I'll mention to my viewers and my colleagues and friends, how's this working out for you? You didn't like Hillary Clinton enough to vote her in to the White House for whatever reason, whether it was because she's a woman, whether it is because she's married and connected to Bill Clinton, whatever it was. How's this working out for us? Because we've lost the Supreme Court, which I think, to me, is the biggest deal out of all of this. Okay, Donald Trump, we know who he is and how he is. That he's been that way since he was born, and he's going to be that way until the day that he dies. But the biggest change to the United States of America was the Supreme Court.
It was, right? And I think a lot of people got caught up in the. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people got caught up in the wanting their guy to win and didn't realize what they lost. At the end of the day, they got so caught up in his. I've always said he reminds me of like a WWE style event where it's like people are rooting for something that, and they got so caught up in that they dropped the ball and missed the whole point. Like you said, I mean, out of all he's done, he's always going to do that. And he's going to be this way from now on. As long as he's around, he's going to be saying something was rigged against him. And, he's going to be in these legal battles probably for the rest of his life, honestly. But what we lost with the Supreme Court and how that all went, I remember back in the time when a lot of people on the left got upset because a lot of people, and myself included, I was a Bernie bro. I wanted Bernie Sanders to be the nominee, and that's who I was pulling for. And then, it became Hillary, and a whole lot of people got upset. It was like, well, I ain't voting, or I'm going to vote third party. And I remember going, no, look, we this might not have been our first choice, but we got to get behind this, because I just had this really sick gut feeling in my stomach, like this presidency is going to be a disaster, and then it ended up being one. And what we lost in the Supreme Court, like you said, that's what people will look back on when we get farther away from this. Right now, we're all caught up in the indictments and everything that's going on, and all the focus is there. But I think years from now, when people look back and they're trying to undo a lot of this, they're going to go back to that moment and go, "There's where it was. There's where we dropped the ball."
That's right. That's absolutely Absolutely right. And we all know it's already too late to go back in history. We can't reverse history, but we can now try to right our wrongs.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you think Trump should go to jail?
Yeah, because if it was me or you, we would. There's people that have went to jail for for trying to forge a vote for one vote. I mean, if he's guilty, I know a lot of people's going to automatically chime in and say, "Wait a minute, he's not guilty yet. He's innocent until proven guilty." Okay, I'll give you that, he is. But if he's found guilty, then absolutely, I think he should. I don't think he should be above the law, because what would be the point? My argument is, if he's found guilty of this, then what would be the point of ever having another president put his hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution? What would be the point of even going through that act again?
Right. In fact, as you say that, every time somebody puts their hand on the Bible, ever since he did it, I roll my eyes. I don't even want to see it, because they're making a complete mockery of that procedure.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree 100%.
Okay. Do you think Biden should be impeached?
The way I answer this question is yes, if he did something wrong. I mean, if he's broke the law, done something wrong, if they have credible evidence and can bring it out. A lot of times we've heard them forever say they have evidence, they have whistleblowers, and then that stuff turns out to not be true. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Joe Biden's above the law either. If he's done something wrong and he's found guilty and the evidence is there that he did it, then yeah, I mean, I don't believe in. I don't like the way that their side is just. I mean, I've had people on the other side say, "We don't care if he's impeached, or we don't care if Trump goes to jail. We'll vote for him in jail." I'm like, I don't want to be that. I want us to do better. And so, yeah, if he was guilty of something and the evidence was there, then yeah.
I agree. I agree with you on that. I tell my friends all the time, I'm not voting for anyone, Democrat, Republican, or independent. I'm not voting for anyone that I don't agree or like what they're doing or saying. And for me, even before the laws, it's about humanity. Okay. And if you can't treat your brother and sister equally as you want them to treat me, then you've lost all respect from me. Because that's how I was raised. Love thy neighbor, do for others. What goes around comes around. Do a good deed. That's how I was taught. So why not whoever the president of the United States would be? Why not them?
Absolutely.
Okay. What is your opinion concerning police brutality?
Well, that's something I've talked a lot about in videos, and I'm guilty. One thing I think I'm guilty of is I was naive and thinking that things were better and thinking that things were getting better. And then, we see so much happening and so much coming out. And I go back, like I said earlier, when you asked the question about, what would you say to young white men and young black men? It's a matter of, and I said it was a matter of listening. It was during like 2020 when we saw what happened with George Floyd and things like that, where I started, really realizing how lopsided it is. And I started talking with friends of mine and hearing what they go through, and it was really eye opening for me, like to talk to a black friend who told me their stories, and we would compare the two stories. Like, for example, one time I'm coming home at night, it's probably like 1:30 in the morning. I've got a tail light out, and I didn't realize it, and I get pulled over. I've got a girl with me. I'm taking her home, and she's sitting there, and she had like a loaded 38 in the car, in her purse. So we get pulled over, and they're going through questions, and then they ask if we have any weapons in the car, and I'm honest, and I'm like, yeah, we got she's got a loaded 38 in her purse, and they're just like, okay, get it out and let us see it and all this, and then they just start giving us advice on how she should go about getting her gun permit, and they're just as friendly as can be with her, and we get let off with a warning, and we go on with our day. And then I'm talking to a buddy of mine, a musician friend, a black musician friend, and I tell him that story. He's like, dude, he's like, that would have never happened if that would have been us. We would have been sitting there, and if it was just a simple parking violation, we're going to be terrified. And I don't know. I just again, going back to what I said about listening to the other side and hearing what people go through and comparing our stories, I've got way more stories about times that I slipped by and was let go, and then when I talk to other people, it's a totally lopsided thing. So,
right. And a lot of us wish that we had what you have.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about the loss of women's rights?
Well, it's very depressing, and that's when I sat down to do that Hillary Clinton video. That's one of the things that was going through my mind was Roe versus Wade being overturned, and I just say to myself, um, nowadays when I got one grandson, but if my daughter decides to have another child, she's going to have less rights than my mother had when she had me. And again, for the side that always talks about smaller government, and not wanting the government to tread on their lives, they've treaded all over the women in recent years, and it's just really depressing to watch all that progress stripped away, and see how some people just don't seem to care because it doesn't affect them.
Right. Right. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. One last question before we flip the script.
Okay.
If you had to choose one thing as an adult that you still need to work on or change, what would that be?
Oh man, probably going back to me talking earlier about changing your perspective. I still need to work on that because there's times that I still will get. I take a lot of things very personal. Some things that aren't, and I have to realize that it's not. But there's times that I'll take things really personal and I'll just beat myself up over it, and I'll get very upset about it, and then I have to tell myself, just be patient. I have to go back and say what I would say to that 16-year-old kid, So that's something I still feel I need to work on is my ability to change that perspective, because sometimes I will get stuck on something and then look back at it later and go, man, I spent a whole lot of time worried about that or mad about that.
Right.
And it was kind of something I sort of credited in my own head. I'm guilty sometimes of getting inside my own head and thinking too and overthinking things to the point that now I'm reading things into something that had nothing to do with it.
Right.
So I'm guilty of that. I'm still working on it.
And you're not the only one. Okay. I lied. I said that was the last question, but actually, I want to ask one of these other questions that are non-political and have nothing to do with your life or anything.
Okay.
Give us 3 of your best movies.
3 of my best movies. Oh man. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson. That's a favorite.
Yeah.
Sling Blade with Billy Bob Thornton. That's a classic down here in the South. We love that one. And I'm going to throw one out here that you've probably not seen, but I would highly recommend it. It's a short film by a guy named Ray McKinnon, and it's called The Accountant. It's about maybe 40 minutes long. It's a short film, but it's one of my favorite films. And there's a really good scene in it where he goes off on this rant about how they stereotype Southern people. And I have drawn so much influence from that rant. And it's kind of an over-the-top comedy, but it's a dark comedy. It's and that's some of my favorite stuff is dark comedy that really makes you think. And so, yeah, I'll throw a curveball with that one because a lot of people don't know that one when I say it. But Ray McKinnon's the hero for that movie.
I will check it out. I will most definitely check it out. The Accountant.
The Accountant, Ray McKinnon. Yeah.
All right. And then I'd like to know name 3 of your favorite music or acting artists.
Oh man. Well, the Drive-By Truckers, they're my favorite band today. I really, let's see. If we're talking about today in this day and age, it would be, I love the Drive-By Truckers. There's also a country band out of Texas called Mike and the Moon Pies that I love a lot. And I love Tyler Childers out of Kentucky. Going back more to the old school stuff that I grew up on like a lot of the old country music like Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash and Allman Brothers and stuff like that. That's big down here. We still crank up some Allman Brothers and Skinner in this part of the world. So they that would be my older heroes. And then this day and age, it's the Truckers and the Moon Pies and Tyler Childers.
All right, awesome. And I'm sure Dolly Parton is beloved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not far from Pigeon Forge where her Dollywood theme park is. So yeah, she's an icon in these parts. I've got. There's Dolly stuff all over this house. If you start looking, we got Dolly koozies.
I love her. We all love her. Absolutely.
She's a great person.
Yes, she is. All right. So that ends my interview with you. And now we will swing the tables around. And you have got the mic.
I know. And I was telling Jeremy earlier, I've sent the questions. I don't have them in front of me, but I've got the questions that I wanted to ask you. He sent them over. So if you have those, I know I picked the numbers of them.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So all right, so I'll go through them. Your first question that you chose to ask me is, what would I tell my 16-year-old self?
Yeah.
Well, I would tell my 16-year-old self that it's damn hard as an adult. Stay 16 and stop trying to grow up, because you'll find it better at 16.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those 16-year-olds that couldn't wait to grow up, and not necessarily wait to grow up, because I had a home, I had a loving, caring family, but I just wanted responsibility. I wanted to be an adult. I wanted to know what it was to go to work and pay my bills, and
Yeah.
I did not realize I did not realize that, really. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
And
That's a great answer.
every once in a while, I kid with my mom, I blame you for all the misery that your children are going through just for existing and living, because you never told us how damn difficult it is to be an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Next question that you have for me is, what advice, guidance, or encouragement would I give to young men today, especially Black young men? Well, there's a lot of advice and encouragement I could give, but I would single it down to follow the rules, follow the laws, go to school, be somebody. Don't be lazy. Don't live off your girlfriends, your parents, your spouses, your children. Work. Go to work. Be diligent. Be smart. Graduate, whether it's with a college degree, or a vocational trade, but find a career, a profession, so that when you get older in life, you've got something to fall back on, and you don't have to worry about governmental aid, or homelessness, or what's going to happen to your family, your wife, your children. Be smart, and start your diligence, your work, from a young age, from 18 or 21. Do not have the mindset that I'm still young. I have forever to be an adult. These are my 20s. I'm gonna live my life. I hate when I hear that. I'm living my life. I hate it. And
Yeah.
then 10, 20 years from now, those same people who say I'm living my life, they're now asking you for a handout, or for help, for
Yeah.
support in whatever way they need it. So that's what I would tell.
Good
Um,
answer.
um, what lessons, if any, have I learned the hard way as an adult? Well, being an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the lessons that it took to be an adult, to be a good father, to be a good person and a good man. Those there were lessons to accomplish or achieve all of those things, because you don't just get up and know what it is to be a perfect father, or what it is to be a perfect businessman. You learn those traits as you go along, trial and ever, and be the type of person that's willing to accept your wrong and your mistakes and your errors, and learn from it, and do your best not to repeat it.
Good answer. I like that.
Okay, and then the fourth question that you have for me was to name three of my best movies. That would be, number one would be Superman. Superman has always been and is my childhood hero.
Yeah.
I loved Superman profusely as a kid back in the 80s.
That's so awesome because that was my favorite too. Was
Was
Superman.
it?
Yeah, it
Awesome,
was.
awesome, awesome. I loved Superman. Christopher Reeves, that
Yeah.
was my boy.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I appreciate who they have today, but nobody will ever do it like
I'm
Christopher
with you.
Reeves.
With you 100% on that. Yeah.
um, my second movie would be The Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah.
I loved. I don't know. I just had I just had there was something with that movie that
Yeah.
I just loved. The costumes, the
Yeah.
singing, the witch. I loved it, and I could have
It's so
watched that
iconic.
movie a
Yeah.
million times.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I would say, because there's so many great movies. I would probably say Star Wars. Star
Yeah.
Wars, the originals, the
Yeah.
Empire Strike Backs, Return of the Jedi, and the regular Star Wars. I
Yeah.
was a Jedi fan.
That's
Um,
awesome, man. You know, it's funny you say that. Like, I was talking to my son, my 22-year-old. Believe it or not, I'm a child of the 80s. I've never watched an entire Star Wars movie all the way through. And my son's 20, yeah, and my son's 22 and is obsessed with them. And he's like, Dad, you grew up in that era and you didn't watch this. And I'm like, I didn't hate it. I just never got around to watch it. So now I'm gonna have to make it a point to watch
I
one.
love them, and I could watch them over and over again
That's awesome.
and again. Not so much the new stuff, but
Mhm.
those three from back in the days.
Awesome.
And then there are other, I will just quickly add, there were about two others that were my favorites. Jaws. I loved
Mhm.
Jaws.
Jaws
One,
is great.
two, and the Revenge.
Mhm.
Jaws. Um, was one of my best movies as well. And then lastly, you asked who's the best concert that I've been to. Well, back in I think it was 1997. I was about 17 years old, and I think it was my first concert that I went to as a concert goer. Because I was in the entertainment field back then, but behind the scenes, I believe it was Mary J. Blige. Mary J.
Oh,
Blige, Puff Daddy, his entire entourage, and a few other folks. It was a summer jam. I'm not sure if you recall that word. Summer jam was a yearly hot concert that the local radio station, the number one R&B and hip hop radio station here in New York City, used to host every year in June, July. Sold out, sold out, sold out. And Mary J. Blige performed, and I was in awe because she
wow.
hit those notes. She changed her wardrobe almost every song. She was beautiful. She had everything going. Everything was on point. Everyone who performed that night, Busta Rhymes, we were on our feet, singing, yelling, and screaming throughout the whole time. I was young. Everyone there was all older than me, and I thought I was in heaven.
That's awesome. That's great.
Okay, and so that is my answers. This was an excellent, excellent interview. You have graced us with your fine presence. Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for having me. It's been great, man. I've really enjoyed talking with you and meeting you.
You are always welcomed on the Esteban Hour. Please continue doing the marvelous job that you're doing over at the Midas Touch Network.
Thank you.
Let them know for us that we believe in what they're doing, and we support the Midas Touch Network every step of the way, and all of their contributors. And we will continue to do that.
Thank
Um,
you.
Thank you for sharing with us your experiences, both political and personal. Um, um, may you continue to be a fine father and family man, and continue to get that word out there for those fellow Tennesseans.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a great time, and y'all come back anytime you want me to. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
So, in conclusion, with that, again, we give much thanks to Mr. Tennessee Brando for all of his hard work and input that he is doing for the cause. Not just for the Midas Touch Network, but for the cause, and for his local brothers and sisters in the great state of Tennessee. So many things mentioned today. We love Southerners. So if anyone believes that city folks, are against Southerners, we are not. We love you. We love your food and your cooking. And we do hope one day that we are more together than we are apart. For all the young men and women out there, we hope that this has been a sense of encouragement and inspiration and motivation to keep on going. There are always trials and tribulations, but keep on going. If you stop, nothing will change. You don't have a chant or a prayer. But if you keep on going, it is always a 50-50 whether you will succeed or not. Um, and as for those who feel, why should Tennessee Brando be speaking with someone like me? Because we put humanity first before anything else. Love thy neighbor. And again, whether y'all hate or not, we love you. Okay, with that said, if you woke up today, today is a great day. And with that said, we hope that you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of your evening. If you have a goal that you have achieved or accomplished today, don't forget to say to yourself, this is how we do it. Take care.